Vera Renczi, dubbed the Black Widow of Romania, was responsible for the deaths of 35 men, making her one of the most prolific female serial killers in history. Born into privilege, Vera seemed destined for a life of comfort and love, but beneath her enchanting exterior lay a heart as cold as the zinc coffins she used to store her victims. From high society marriages to scandalous affairs, Vera's life was a rollercoaster of passion and peril. Her charm was irresistible, her beauty legendary, but those who fell for her allure paid the ultimate price. Vera's lovers vanished one by one, each ending up in her secret mortuary. It wasn't until a devoted wife's relentless quest for her missing husband that Vera's gruesome hobby was uncovered. Welcome to Wicked History, everyone. If there are other historical bizarreries you'd like to see explored, drop a suggestion in the comments. Now let's dive in. Born in Bucharest to well-to-do parents, Vera started life with a silver spoon practically lodged in her cheek. She received a fine education, and from her earliest days showed an uncanny knack for causing trouble. Like a moth to a fatal flame. Her mother tragically passed away when Vera was still a child, leaving her father to inherit a spirited 10-year-old handful. Despite the best efforts of several governesses who tried to mold her into a model young lady, Vera soon became an expert in circumventing authority. Her primary interest, the companionship of the opposite sex. It was as if she had an allergy to female friends. As she blossomed into a beauty, she found it remarkably easy to turn heads and break hearts. Her father, an easygoing man, was always trying to stay on Vera's good side, even if that meant turning a blind eye to her more questionable choices. When she turned 15, her escapades reached new heights, or depths, depending on your perspective. She was discovered at midnight in the dormitory of a boys' school, demonstrating her dedication to the art of waywardness. Several times she ran away with her latest flame, only to return a few days later, claiming she was bored of her lover. Her father's admonishments fell on deaf ears, and one can only imagine his sigh of relief when Vera finally fell head over heels for someone more suitable. Enter the wealthy, dashing businessman many years her senior. He was not only rich, but also handsome, a combination that spoke to Vera's romantic soul. He found himself equally enchanted by the irresistible Vera, despite the significant age difference. Finally, it seemed, Vera had found a match that could keep up with her tempestuous heart. From the moment of their first meeting, Vera transformed into a different person entirely. She became modest and subdued, sweetly content to cater to her lover's every whim. Their marriage was the talk of the town in Bucharest, a grand social event that culminated in a honeymoon in the Tyrol, with the blessings of Vera's father and the well wishes of their many friends. Vera and her husband settled into his vast mansion, where she quickly adapted to managing the large household with surprising competence. Later on, a baby boy arrived, bringing joy to both parents. Vera dedicated every waking hour to the well-being of her child, becoming the epitome of a doting mother. However, one day Vera appeared in town looking utterly distraught. Her husband, whom she loved beyond everything, had vanished without a trace, leaving no word of warning or a single note explaining his departure. Tearfully, she shared her plight with friends, who offered their condolences and support. But to this, Vera responded with a wan smile, saying, "He'll never come back to me." The irony of the situation was not lost on her friends, who couldn't help but marvel at how swiftly life had turned the tables on the once indomitable Vera. She was literally dead right, for at that very moment, her husband was indeed the first of 35 bodies to enter what would become a domestic tomb. Despite this macabre turn of events, Vera threw herself into raising her boy, who grew to be the spitting image of his father. To her friends, she often remarked with a blend of pride and pathos on her son's resemblance, saying, "My husband will always be with me." But Vera's journey into domesticity was short-lived. She soon embarked on a carefree bohemian life, throwing convention to the wind and setting tongues wagging in a town that had once known her as the epitome of propriety. Night after night, she sought the company of young men, making up for lost time with a fervor that left the community buzzing. Her wild lifestyle took a sudden turn when she was involved in a car accident, an incident that seemed to pave the way for yet another chapter in her tumultuous love life. This time, Vera's heart was captured by Vera Renczi, a young ne'er-do-well whose only notable attribute was his Adonis-like appearance. This second major romance managed to tame Vera once more, proving that even the most ardent hearts can be subdued by the right combination of charm and cheekbones. But as soon as they were man and wife, Vera settled into her new role. However, it wasn't long before her husband tired of his young bride and began seeking pleasures elsewhere. Vera was more than willing to invite scandal with her own romantic escapades, and freely admitted she wasn't cut out for the whole "till death do us part" routine. But the one thing she couldn't tolerate was her husband finding happiness in another woman's arms. Vera, who knew all too well the depth and extent of her own burning passion and the unbounded generosity she lavished on her lovers, couldn't stand the thought of Joseph yielding to the embraces of another. For jealous Vera, there was an easy way out. After all, her former husband was already resting in his little zinc sarcophagus, and the secret mortuary had plenty of room for newcomers. Thus, 4 months after their wedding, Joseph embarked on a long journey, a sentiment heartily endorsed by all who were aware of his philandering ways. In reality, Joseph's journey wasn't a trip to some far-off land, but rather a one-way ticket to the cellar, where his predecessor lay. It was a destination from which there was no return, proving once again that Vera had a unique way of handling marital dissatisfaction, one that was as permanent as it was deadly. A year later, Vera announced that her second husband was missing forever. While the message might have been false, it effectively freed her to dive back into the gay life, transitioning from the arms of one lover to another with considerable, if unladylike, alacrity. In the social circles where she once shone, her reputation was tarnished, but this didn't dampen the infatuation she seemed to inspire. Vera was content with whichever lover was currently in her favor, lavishing him with all the passion she could muster. However, like the notorious Black Widow spider, she consumed her mate as soon as his ardor waned. For days and nights, she would sit beside him, tenderly administering small doses of arsenic, eventually ushering him into eternity and the cellar below. One after another, her lovers were enticed and doomed into her fatal embrace. 3 old retainers who believed their mistress could do no wrong accepted the presence of various lovers as part of the routine. They were remarkably unperturbed by the disappearance of these visitors. The fact that no fewer than 35 men ended up in the house of death without arousing suspicion seems almost incredible. But there's always a last time, and in this case it was the turn of a wealthy, unattached male from the night haunts of Berkerekul. Recently married and deeply in love with his beautiful young bride, he confided his affection to Vera, which acted as a challenge to the Borgia of Berkerekul. She exerted all her wiles, beauty, and the violence of her passion, flattered by his attention. Soon enough, he too found himself within the chateau, joining the many who had made their final pilgrimage of love. Thus, Vera's deadly pattern continued, a dance of passion and poison that left a trail of broken hearts and lifeless bodies in her wake. But despite the ecstasy the bridegroom enjoyed with Vera, he was soon consumed with remorse. The illicit honeymoon was over. His own wife was expecting a baby. He resolved to return to her and never see Vera again. This pathetic confession served as his death warrant. Vera insisted he come to take a farewell meal with her one evening, promising they would say goodbye in each other's arms as befit the end of such a grand romance. The idea of one last night of love appealed to the young man's vanity, and he gladly accepted the invitation. On the night of their final supper, Vera, ever the consummate actress, poured out wine and, holding her glass aloft, drank to the happiness of the only man I ever loved. The young man never responded to this cynical toast, for Vera had dropped a fatal dose of arsenic into his glass, adding a grain or two of strychnine for good measure. Then she callously watched him die in agony. That night, when the household had retired, Vera gathered his body into her strong arms and carried it down into the cellar. There, she placed him in one of the zinc coffins, on which she inscribed his name with a chilling nonchalance. It was the bride-wife of the dead man who proved to be Vera's nemesis. When her husband failed to return from his short business trip, she made inquiries at his workplace, only to discover there had been no such business trip on the day of his departure, nor indeed at any of the other times when her husband had absented himself from home. Realizing something was terribly amiss, the wife pursued the matter with a determination fueled by grief and suspicion. Her relentless inquiries finally led her to uncover the truth about Vera, the Borgia of Berkerekul, and her secret mortuary. The grisly discovery brought an end to Vera's deadly affairs, exposing the macabre depths of her passions and the final resting place of her many lovers. At once she went to the police, certain that her husband had fallen into the clutches of some evil woman, but their lackluster response prompted her to take matters into her own hands. Determined to rescue her husband from the rival who had taken him away, she launched her own investigation. From inquiries among her husband's closest friends, his expectant wife was astounded to learn about a beautiful blonde with whom her husband had been seen in a cafe. Armed with this information, she approached the police again. This time, they picked up the trail and brought Vera in for questioning. "Yes," Vera answered without a shadow of hesitation when asked about the missing man. "He was my lover. I trusted him. But when he told me, as he lay in my arms one night, that he was married to a girl he loathed and detested, I dismissed him. I told him to dress and get out. I have not seen him since." Her story was devastatingly frank and plausible on the surface, enough to momentarily impress the police. However, it did not convince the sorrowing wife, who pressed on with her own inquiries. When she gathered sufficient evidence, she insisted that the police search Vera's house. By now, she dreaded what they might find, but was determined to leave no stone unturned in uncovering the truth about her husband's disappearance. The police took swift action. They surrounded the chateau and broke into the cellar, which was stark except for a single comfortable easy chair set in the middle of the room. Neatly arranged around the walls were 35 zinc coffins, each containing the body of a husband or lover. Among them, shockingly, was the body of Vera's own son. Thus, the dreadful secret of Vera's morbid hobby was revealed. The sorrowing wife's relentless pursuit of truth had unveiled the sinister depths of Vera's passions, ensuring that justice would finally be served for the countless men who had fallen victim to her fatal charms. At first, Vera Renczi denied everything. However, as one lover after another was traced from his home to hers, she eventually broke down and confessed. When asked what impelled her to kill, she responded chillingly, "I was a possessive woman. I dare not let them go to the embraces of anyone else." "And the easy chair in the cellar?" the investigators inquired. She smiled grimly. "I like to go down there in the evening and sit among my victims, gloating over their fate," she replied. "And why did you kill your son?" came the next question. "Because he threatened to expose me," was her callous answer. No greater depravity had been revealed than in the figure of Vera Renczi, who slew and coffined her lovers with diabolical precision. To say she was a sex-crazed nymphomaniac would be an understatement. Unlike those who yield themselves to the embraces of any man in their lust for satisfaction without attachment, Vera's actions demonstrated a far more sinister intent. The nymphomaniac does not love anybody in the strict sense, often losing all interest in their partner completely after a brief passion. With Vera, it was very different. Her sex urge was just as great, and she could transition from one lover to another almost without pause. However, those whom she possessed, she refused to yield to anyone else. Her embrace was truly the clutch of death. Leading psychiatrists of Europe who examined the vampire of Berkerekul were vastly intrigued by the case. When asked whether men or women were more cruel by nature, one psychiatrist opined, "Given a man and a woman equally devoid of moral character, I believe the woman will usually be found to be more cruel." Vera's behavior certainly supported this theory. At the final scene of her trial, Vera listened sullenly as the sentence of death was passed upon her, knowing full well that it would likely be commuted to life imprisonment. Scornfully, she tossed her head and vanished from public sight forever, leaving behind a legacy of horror that would intrigue and terrify generations to come. In prison, Vera Renczi's condition worsened significantly. Confined to her cell, she believed she was surrounded by all the people she had killed, speaking to them aloud for hours. Her dialogues, often obscene, attracted violence and hostility from the other inmates. Schizophrenic and increasingly unstable, Vera was eventually transferred to an asylum. There, her mental state continued to deteriorate. She remained haunted by the ghosts of her victims, her sanity slipping further away with each passing day. Vera's final days were marked by a descent into madness, culminating in a brain hemorrhage that claimed her life shortly before the start of World War II. Thus ended the life of the infamous vampire of Berkerakul, leaving behind a legacy as dark and twisted as her tormented mind. Thanks for tuning in to this chilling tale of love and lethal liaisons. If you enjoyed our deep dive into the twisted world of Vera Renczi, the Black Widow of Romania, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Remember folks, if your date suggests a cozy evening in a cellar, maybe swipe left instead. Stay safe, stay curious, and keep your arsenic in the pantry. Until next time.